Hi everyone, welcome to the Social Media Derby. On today's episode, we'll be speaking to a very, very special guest, Alan Lau, the co-founder of the Frank Su Foundation and chairman of EC Hornets, the East and Southeast Asian Football Supporters Group. But before then, let's talk about our teams, Johns. I guess we can start with Man U. Tough result away at West Ham. Not the greatest performance. 2-1-0 away defeats in a week. Our top four hopes now in a bit of jeopardy. Liverpool 1 point behind us. Got a game in hand, but no result seems a given at the moment. Personally, before I want to get your opinion, rival opinion on the results, shocker. Watch the game. It was really lackluster. So first half, we had a couple of chances. I think Anthony hit the post. I think someone else also hit the post with a kind of a flash shot. And we had our chances here and there. Anthony Martial had a good chance in the second half as well. Rashford had a good chance as well. But just not clinical. And unfortunately, when you're not clinical and Rashford's not coming up with goals, there's always a chance you can lose a goal here and there. And we had it in a week at Brighton. Really great defensive performance. Get into added time and Luke Shaw pretends he's playing netball and we give away a penalty and we lose 1-0. And past weekend, again, defensive error. This time, David De Gea, quite a common culprit in these situations. Really, really poor shot. Kind of a bit of a P-roller, to be honest, for Ben Rama. Should easily be stopped or at least parried away. And biscuit wrists just went straight through him into the corner and we lose. So what do you think? Do you think, first of all, what's your take on the results and how do you think we're trending for the last part of the season?
I mean, I think you summed it up pretty well. It was a poor result, right? I mean, West Ham seem like they're doing this to a few people at the moment, but you should be beating them. And I think the main takeaway for me was, the defensive errors, the goalkeeping errors are never nice to see, but they're, I guess as a Man United fan, you're probably somewhat expecting some of them at this point in the season when you've got this many injuries. And as you say, Rich T, biscuit hands, De Gea is just continuously doing what he does. But I think the more worrying thing on my part was just the lack of real threat you had on the goal. And I feel like without Rashford firing, seemed like there's not much really to come from your team. And I think maybe that can come down to some of the player selection. So, for example, with Weghorst, so what's your viewpoint on him getting game time recently? What would you like to see to try and get more of a goal threat?
Yeah, it's an interesting one because I think Weghorst has always been a bit of a divisive player for us, even though he's kind of only joined on loan and it's quite clearly not a long-term fix. But he started off really lively and there was obviously it was trending on social media, wasn't it? The stuff about how when he presses, how he triggers the press and how effective he is when it comes to that side of the game. But unfortunately, if you're playing 20 plus games and you're only scoring 2 or 3 goals, the amount of presses you're triggering and the amount of graft and hard work you're doing is not really going to cut it. So I think there was a little period around the new year, January, February time, I'm thinking around the Europa League when we went to Barcelona and got a really good draw and beat them at home, where Weghorst looked like he was even though he wasn't scoring necessarily, he was really impacting the games beyond just triggering a press. But pretty much the last couple of months he's been pretty ineffective as well. So, and the really worrying thing is that's no one's been able to, as Rashford I think has deserved a bit of a dip in form. He's been really good for most part of the rest of the season. We haven't had anyone step up. And I think when you look at all the really good teams, you look at City, you look at where you guys are this season, the goals are being spread. And when you look at our team, the goals are just not being spread. As much as you guys love to banter Anthony and a lot of rival fans do because of his transfer fee, he's chipped in with a few goals, but he's one of only a few that I think has got more than 5 or 6 goals in the season, all comps. Martial, Sancho, Weghorst himself, even Bruno, they haven't chipped in with enough goals. So you look at the situation we're in right now, and it's looking. I don't even want to put too much on the defence, to be honest. Apart from the errors leading to goals, Luke Shaw and De Gea in the recent week, it's the fact that we aren't scoring. So you can give a goal away here or there. Well, it's not like we've been conceding 7 like against Liverpool week in, week out.
Yeah.
We're conceding 1 goal and losing. Like, where's the attacking threat? Where's the goals coming from the side?
I mean, on that point, I kind of mentioned before, you didn't have that much of an attacking threat. I mean, in this game, you did have, like you talked about, right? You hit the post a couple of times. You had quite a few shots. I mean, both teams had quite a few shots. I think maybe it's more just the clinical nature. You're just not able to get them to go in. And what do you think that comes down to? Because you're clearly having shots on target. You're clearly having shots, I mean, near the target, with the hitting the post a couple of times. What do you think it is that is causing you to be a little bit less clinical? Because, I mean, with Rashford earlier this season, I think clinical is one of the main words you were calling him, right? Like, every shot he was taking essentially was going in. So what do you think it is right now that's making you a little bit less clinical than you have been earlier in the season?
I don't know. It's hard to put your finger on it, because even the better matches we've had in recent weeks, I think of Everton at home where we pummeled them. And in the first half, really, we should have been 5-6-0 up. And it was the fact that we weren't clinical, and it took, 10 odd chances before McTominay was finally able to get us on the score sheet. I just can think back to even Nottingham Forest away. We had loads of chances. We just weren't able to put them in the back of the net. I even think of, now the Europa League, we should have never gone out to Sevilla. In that first half of the first leg, we should have been outside. We should have been 2, 3, 4-0 up, and we were only 2-0 up. And even in the second half, before things unravelled, I think of Anthony, missing a really good chance one-on-one with the goalie. I think of a couple of other opportunities we spurned where we should have. I think of there was one moment where Weghorst could have slide rule past it to, I think it was Elanga, but instead he passed it back to Malacia, which was a harder shot. They'd already got more players on the line, and I think it's not only the finishing, it's making the last pass that we're kind of a lot of the time getting wrong and not giving ourselves basically the higher percentage opportunity to score. So a lot of the time when we're shooting, I think of one against West Ham recently where in that match where Bruno tried to, in the dying seconds of the game, he decided instead of putting a cross in where we had bodies in the box to shoot with his weaker left foot and try and put one in the top corner. Like, that's a low percentage chance. It's highly unlikely, he's going to be able to score that. And it's highly unlikely any player really is going to be able to score that on their weaker foot. We're just not playing the percentages right. And when you do that, I think it's not a shock that you're going to have trouble converting goals and scoring more goals. And I think that's what it boils down to. But, I mean, we all know, right? We're looking for a striker. So that's something that obviously Ten Hag knows as well. It's not something that we're kind of unaware of and that is catching us by surprise. We just haven't scored enough goals, especially in the Premier League. So I think, fingers crossed, we're able to maintain and just get over the line and get top 4.
So with that in mind, I mean, looking at the table, you're 2 points off of Newcastle, Liverpool 1 point off of you, but you've got a game in hand on them. What's your outlook for the rest of the season? Do you think you can squeak it in? Do you reckon you can maybe nick third? What do you reckon is going to happen?
So this is really interesting, man. Like a couple of weeks ago, I thought it was going to be certain. Man U, Newcastle got top 4, and there'd be a bit of a battle. Obviously, didn't see Newcastle or predict Newcastle losing to you guys at home. So that's, a positive for us in our chances. I didn't see them losing away to Villa as well. So we have to, the issue is I don't think we're good enough to take advantage of their mistakes. So I do think Newcastle will end up still being third. And I think the worry we've got now is to get enough wins to try and maintain fourth. I think luckily we've got 3 of our last 4 games are at home. Our home form's been pretty good this season, really strong actually. Only I think 1 loss to Brighton at home earlier in the season and a couple of draws here and there. So I'm hopeful we can get the 3 wins necessary at home to get us over the line. So I think we'll just about scrape 4th. But, I wouldn't be shocked at all if we dropped out of the top four and we drew one of those matches. And because if you look at Liverpool's fixtures, they all look like certain wins. They've got, I think,
and when you take into account their form as well, I mean even more so.
Yeah, the Liverpool form stuff is a bit of a tricky one, because we went through a patch like that where we were technically on form, winning loads of games, but they were by the odd goal. Like, I think there's one game that Liverpool won away, I think it was away to Nottingham Forest or Leicester, I think it was, and they won like 5 or 6-1, which was a really great result. But a lot of their other games have been, scraping a 1-0. Yeah, it was Leeds, exactly. Scraping a 1-0 or scraping a 3-2, I think, at home to Forest. They've had some real Spurs. Yeah, they bottled a 3-0 lead and then somehow managed to still win it in the end. So it's kind of been a bit of a tricky one to read. But I do think they're going to get their wins in the last 3 games. So it's definitely going to be down to us now to make sure. I don't care where we get the wins. If we win away to Bournemouth, that'll be great. And win 2 at home, that'll be great. Or if we get 3 wins at home, I'll be happy. But I think we've unnecessarily made this a top 4 race. I don't think it was. And I don't think it's all our doing. I do think Ten Hag needs to take some of the blame for maybe some of his in-game management, which I think we were rightly praising about him earlier in the season. I think he's gotten a few things wrong in the last couple of weeks. But I also think you're going to crack jokes about this because we talked about it earlier, but there is a fatigue element, and I do think there's an element of they've played. I think who's it? I know one of the online guys like Mark Goldbridge or something always says we've been playing 3 games a week for 3 months. Now, I don't know how the maths works on that, but we've definitely been playing a game every 3 or 4 days because of the Europa League and because of the World Cup. So hopefully, now that I think we've got a week now until Wolves at home. I'm going to be going to that match, so hopefully we'll be rested and we'll be able to, put on a performance that's looked a bit more like how we've been playing earlier in the season. But yeah, let's see how it goes. Let's talk about you guys, huh? Amazing result away at Newcastle. The first 10 minutes looked very iffy, and rightly, the kind of the atmosphere you expect. I mean, we got slapped there 2-0 only a couple of weeks ago. It looked like that was on the cards, but man, Odegaard, some of your performances, you turned that around. It was unbelievable.
Yeah, no, it's amazing to see. I mean, like we kind of have talked about a little bit before, that run of results that we had, leading up to the City match and including the City match was extremely disheartening. It was, I've heard people talk about bottling and so on and so forth. And, one of the key kind of things about our season, this season particularly, and one of the big things that has kind of given a lot of Arsenal fans confidence, I think, was that every time we had a bad result, we bounced back immediately. And I think now with what we're seeing with the last couple of games here with Arsenal, it feels as if we've bounced back properly. And as you said, that result against Newcastle was unbelievable to me. Like you said, the first 10 minutes were a bit shaky. A couple of, I guess, not controversies, but, with the handball and everything going on there and VAR. And obviously, I think rightfully it was not a handball. So,
I was going to ask you that. Because I've seen some stuff online saying so. It's a bit of a divisive one. Some people say let the law hit his leg, then hit his arm, so it's not a handball. Some people saying still clearly the biggest action was with the hand. What do you don't think is a handball? Yeah,
mate. I don't even know what the handball rule is anymore. I mean, it's impossible for anyone to argue, is it a handball, is it not a handball, because it's so unclear as to what a handball actually is these days. And it also makes it worse that we've had like a mid-season tournament with the World Cup where you have slightly different rules. You then go and watch European games where, again, they have slightly different rules. And then you come back to the Premier League and you got no idea what a handball actually is these days, right? So I think, if we're going by the letter of the law, which I don't even know if it is the letter of the law, because again, the FA doesn't ever come out, or the Premier League doesn't ever come out and say very clearly, this is a handball, this is not a handball, and then actually consistently implement that through refereeing. So, I've heard a lot about the whole idea that if it comes off another part of your body and then hits your arm, it's not a handball. So by that letter of the law, it's not a handball to me. And I think, from what I've been hearing, pundits elsewhere and other YouTube shows and so on, I've heard a general consensus that it was not a handball. So I'm willing to go with that. I think from, they were from neutral fans and so on. Of course, Newcastle are going to feel hard done by, but at the end of the day, if we're going to really get down into the nitty gritty of who's getting shafted this season, we're definitely one of the teams that have had a bit of a shafting earlier this season, with not drawing lines and so on. So I think in that regard, I think it was not a handball, and I think we can argue all day long until the Premier League come out, until the FA come out and just clear up what a bloody handball is, and then we see it consistently applied across all the matches that we see.
No, but I think you're right though, because I think that's where people have to think. Like, once we get beyond our kind of fan bias, we need to think about things a bit logically around this. So I think earlier in the Premier League, this rule has been fairly consistent, that if it hit a part of your body and then hit your hand, it wasn't a handball. The problem we have is, for example, from a Man U perspective, I remember earlier on in the season, home at Old Trafford against Real Sociedad, Lisandro Martinez jumps out to block a ball, hits his leg, then hits his arm. They give a pen, they score, we lose the game, and then we're all just outraged because we're thinking and we're going logically by what we see in the Premier League as that's not handball. In Europe, though, unfortunately, that seems to be a handball. You see it given quite regularly, both in the European competitions as well as other European leagues, and in the World Cup, for example. So it's just about factoring in which competition we're in. It shouldn't be that, in my opinion. I think we should be using the same rules on offside and handballs unilaterally in every form of football. But when you've got these different FAs and stuff, you've got to take that into consideration. But once you get beyond that, I think, honestly, you guys were unbelievable for the rest of that game. And you showed so much now. So I think I saw Gary Neville saying that Arsenal grew up in that match. And I know you always take the piss out of Gary Neville because he's a bit harsh on Arsenal and sometimes chats out of his Danny Mills. But in this case, I think he was quite on point. I do think you guys showed a lot of maturity and a bit of housery as well. You saw little things here and there where you were kicking balls away, wasting a bit of time here and there. But you also you played that beautiful football, and then you did that little real dark art stuff. So I imagine you enjoyed it.
I certainly did enjoy it. I mean, with what's going on right now, you would expect that the game to be difficult for us, right? You'd expect us not to get anything out of that game. Whereas if you were to look at some of the other games where we lost points, whether it was Southampton or West Ham, it's the opposite. We are expecting something from it. But yesterday, I completely, for this one time only, I agree with Gary Neville. I think we did grow up, and I think you're going to continue to see that happen over and over. With the age of our squad, there is a lot of learning to be done, right? There's going to be a lot more learning opportunities like that. I don't see us winning the league this year, but I think just the whole experience of what's going on and the fact that we won't win it is going to be a massive learning opportunity for us too. And I just want to bring up one point. I know we talked a lot about this kind of off camera, just in our general discussions, was, we bought Jorginho, we bought some players for experience. We were hoping that around this time of the season that those players would come in and kind of help us. And is it a coincidence that we start Jorginho, he gets man of the match, and just like you said, we show a bit more experience, we show a bit more nous, we show a bit more of that tousery that you're talking about to get a win, right? Because think about it, when there have been other times where we've been 2-0 up and we've thrown that lead away, right? So I think to me it makes a lot of sense. I'm glad that Arteta's maybe twigged it now. Jorginho played a great game, right? He was outstanding. It definitely put a new feel on our team for that game. And I think I don't know what your perspective is on it, but I definitely would like to see a little bit more of that tactical nous being used across games like this in the future. Learning experience is great and everything, but I mean, Jorginho has got to be front and center in that learning experience. He's going to be one of the more experienced players in that team now, and I would like to see him utilised for that reason. But what's your take on it? How did you view the game? What do you think was the key difference there in comparison to some of our previous performances?
No, I alluded it to earlier, didn't I? I think you guys, I agree with Gary Neville. I think you really showed up big time, and I think you kind of rode the wave in the first 10 minutes when things were all frantic, and it was the way things are going to be at St James's Park. I think going forward now under this new ownership, they're going to be a right tough away day going forward. They have been in years gone by, but they're going to be really, really tough away game. It's going to be akin to Anfield, I think, going forward. And you guys were amazing. You basically had a similar situation to your game at Anfield. You started quick once you got past that. You got the 2-0, you got the goal lead at least at half time, and then you scored the other one in the second half. And you kind of just rode it out. I thought it was a really mature performance. I think you're right to shout out Jorginho. It's not only that game, I think he was great against Chelsea in midweek as well. So it's two really mature performances, and I think Arteta's only doing what you guys have been asking for. I've been looking online and seeing what Arsenal fans have been saying. I've been watching other shows. A lot of Arsenal fans have been asking for a shake-up. There's been some players who've clearly not been performing well over the last couple of weeks. Number 5, Chargy is one of them. He hasn't been playing great recently. Bringing Jorginho in has helped massively. I think Zinchenko's still a bit of a shaky one. I do think bringing on Tierney in the second half really shored things up, and that might be something you'd want to do against Brighton, for example, coming up, or some of your other fixtures if it's necessary. Because I think Zinchenko's kind of been, people have marked his card as someone they can get at. And similar to Trent in a lot of ways, he's great going forward. He's great when he tucks into midfield, but he can get done. So I think that might be something still. He's quite lucky to still be starting a lot of these games. So I think he was still also a bit shaky. But yeah, Jorginho was great. I mean, Martin Odegaard, unbelievable. He ran the show. He was amazing. He could have had a hat-trick. I mean, he was playing unbelievably. I think Saka showed up as well for the first time in a couple of weeks. I know he's had a bit of a shaky last couple of weeks, but he was great. He looked really lively. Martinelli as well. I think Kiwior did well. We talked about it off camera. We've been a lot of questions raised about why he's not been playing. Can you just play 2 left footers in defence? Surely it's going to be better than Holding, because he's obviously been giving away some pens and been a bit shaky. But I thought he was great as well. I think, man, honestly, if I was an Arsenal fan, regardless of what happens in the rest of the season, away at Newcastle, that's a great result. And then off the back of the Chelsea, I mean, I know we can't be screaming about beating Chelsea, right? They're absolutely in the mud. They're the biggest mudded team we've probably ever seen in the top 6 in the Prem, right? They're probably about to finish 10th or something like that. So it's no big deal beating them. But it was the way you guys played. It looked a lot more assured. It didn't look shaky. It looked like you didn't have those results. So I think you're looking good. What do you think about your last 3 matches? I think we talked about it off camera. You've got, is it Brighton?
Yeah, we got Brighton at home, Nottingham Forest, and then Wolves. And I think,
what do you think about let's start with the Brighton game. How do you think that one's going to go? Because they've been doing well, minus what happened earlier today. What do you think?
I mean, I've got to believe that we're going to get a win there. I mean, we're at home. We won our earlier fixture against them this season, 4-2. They are a very good team, and like you said, there definitely could be some defensive problems for us if we don't set up correctly. And I think, at least from my standpoint, we've got to set the right foundation for the team. And I think a strong defensive foundation allows our attackers to shine. It allows people like Martin Odegaard to take control of the game. Like you said, we've got to ride out those periods where we're not on top. And we had those periods happen. Maybe that's something where experience-wise we can get a bit better. We can get a bit smarter. In terms of, how if you look at how City, for example, tends to ride out those periods, there's a lot of experience and calm heads in that team that get the team through those periods. And I'm sure there will be some shaky periods against Brighton. And I think the key there is a solid defensive foundation to set us up to get through those periods so that we can start attacking. And we can have people like Martinelli, Saka, Odegaard getting in the game and really dominating and putting us ahead. So I've got to believe, I think if I'm going to make a prediction, I'm going to say a 3-1. And again, I think it's going to be similar to Chelsea, where we're going to go up by 3 and then maybe get a little bit complacent at the end and let a goal in. I've got to think that will be that result. I think generally speaking, the rest of the results, I expect 3 wins, to be honest with you, 3 out of 3. But again, I don't think that's going to be enough to get us back ahead of City. I don't see them dropping enough points. I don't see them, losing or drawing any of the games that they've got left. I know they're not the easiest games, but I definitely don't see them slipping up. So I think it's going to be 3 out of 3 for us, but I still don't see that making any big difference.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think you guys are probably left it too late now for the comeback in terms of winning the league, but I think you can still get at least 2 wins out of 3. I think the Brighton one's probably going to be the hardest one, but I think you've got a really good shot. I think Brighton obviously coming off the most recent game they've just had where they lost 5-1 to Everton at home. I think it's going to be.
Yeah,
I can see them kind of tailing off. I think they've got the most games left in the season left. I think they've got 5 games still left.
Yeah,
like they're going to be playing a game every 3 or 4 days. I don't think a club like Brighton are prepared for that. I don't think they've got the squad for that. I think eventually, as good as they've been, I think they're gonna feel it in these coming weeks, and they'll probably have a few more, uncharacteristic defeats like they've had. No, like you and I couldn't have predicted. They've just beaten us 1-0 in midweek. There's no way we would have predicted they would lose 5-1 at home to relegation struggling Everton. So I think you guys have got this sealed, and I think you'll be pushing City until the last game. But I still don't think it's going to be enough. I think it's going to be a little too late. But still, great momentum. Great momentum. We can't rule out this momentum that you're going to take into next season. As long as the transfer window goes well, like you said earlier, these players are going to get a year older, a year more experience. They'll still have Jorginho, they'll still have Xhaka, they'll still have Chargy, they'll still have a few players in there who've got, a bit more experience. And you never know, you might add a player or two with some experience as well. And I think you'll be better prepared for a title charge if it happens next season. So I think you guys have got a lot to be excited about. And I think the bottling tag can be dropped now. Because I think you may have bottled the title, but I think it's very harsh to say that about a young team challenging for the first time. I think it was just inexperience, you weren't used to the pressure, and your ass fell out. But I think it's normal. Good teams happen.
I mean, we're going to get that. We're going to get the tag. We're going to get labelled the bottlers. We're going to get labelled that. I get it. And I fully expect that to continue to be the banter that we get from fans elsewhere, over the next couple of seasons and maybe longer. But I definitely think, like you said, it's been a massive learning opportunity. We haven't been anywhere near this level for a very long time. The fact that we've got such a young squad obviously puts us in a great position to sustain some sort of, good results and some sort of high league, finishes. So I definitely think we're in a good position. We could obviously be in a better position in terms of, not bottling that lead and being Premier League winners after such a long time. But I definitely think, we do need a couple of people to add to our squad. I definitely think when you add in the whole complexity now of having to play in Europe next year, I don't know if our squad deals with a lot of games. I don't think it deals with a lot of injuries. I don't think necessarily we have the squad depth right now to deal with being in, multiple competitions for a long period of time. If we were to compare with what Man United had to go through this season, and in terms of playing so many games and, all of that bollocks about playing 3 games a week for however long, I don't think our team can deal with that in the same sort of capacity. I definitely think we're going to have a lot more issues there. So I would like to definitely see us, strengthen our squad. I'd like to see a bit more experience in the team too. I do like the idea of being a young team, but at the same time, like we talked about with Jorginho, like we talked about with some of our kind of more experienced players, I do like what they offer our team. And I do think it's critical that we have that so that all of the responsibility doesn't fall onto young shoulders like Saka or Martinelli or Odegaard to pull us out of the mud when we're in troubled situations. So I would like to see us add a bit more quality, add a bit more experience into our team. And I think obviously with Champions League football, if we can open up the purse strings a little bit, I do see that being a possibility for us. So, a lot of optimistic thinking for next season and beyond from an Arsenal perspective. And I would love to see us just finish off the season strong. I don't think, like I said, I don't think we're going to win the league now, but a strong finish is going to be important. I want to see us putting in hours, putting in work until the very end of the season. I want to make sure that these next three games we get through, 9 out of 9 points, and we really put the pressure on City and make sure they've got to deliver on every single one of their games left. So that's how I see things. I hope against Brighton, Nottingham Forest, and Wolves we can put in some good performances and really go out in a proud manner at the end of the season for sure.
Yeah, no, couldn't agree with you more, man. I think that'll be a really good end to the season, and yeah, there'll be disappointment, but I think it's after a bit of reflection. I think you guys will all realise it's been a really good season, and it's been one that us as United fans we haven't had either. We haven't been in the race since Fergie left. We've finished second a couple of times, but we've never been close. And if you guys are able to win all your remaining games, you will take it to the final day, and you will push City properly and feel like you've actually, you may not have won the league, but you've at least worked and make sure that the team that wins the league have done everything that they can to win it, and you haven't bottled it or phoned it in or whatever the phrase is. But anyway, enough about our teams. Let's welcome
Yeah.
in our special guest, Alan Lau, the co-founder of the Frank Sue Foundation and the chairman of EC Hornets, the Eastern Southeast Asian Football Supporters Group. Hi, Alan. Welcome to the podcast, mate. For our viewers, because we obviously know you really well, but a lot of our audience or people listening might not know too much about you and the Frank Sue Foundation. Could you give us just a short, briefish intro of the foundation and yourself and how you got into football?
Yep, sure. Thank you for having me first. So the Frank Sue Foundation. So Frank played football in the 30s and 40s. He's the first player from a Chinese heritage to play in the English Football League. He played for and captained Stoke. He played for Leicester, played for Luton, and he's the first person of colour to play for England. He played for England 9 times. And today that this recording's been made is actually our Frank Sue Day, where we celebrate his debut for England on May the 9th, 1942. So what the foundation does is, firstly, we are here to tell his story because it's really important that everyone knows all about him. Secondly, to work with other East and Southeast Asian communities to help build better communities. And then finally, to work with anyone from an East and Southeast Asian background in their pursuit in football, whether it's to be a player, a coach, a fan, anything really. We just want to be there as a voice and to help and lend support.
No, that's great, mate. And what about yourself? How did you get into football before the foundation? Were you already working in football, or was this something that started with the foundation?
I know. So I've been a volunteer doing things in the Chinese footballing community, grassroots community, for about 15 years, I'd say. I ran the Chinese Community Centre football team. I ran tournaments. And yeah, I just had a love of football. When growing up in England is, football's part of life, isn't it? You wake up, you go and play football, you go to school, come home, play a bit more football, have dinner, go to bed, and repeat, don't you? So, you know, it's it's part of identity, I guess. And I'm a massive Watford fan, as you guys know, season ticket holder, and I also run the EC Hornets, which is East and Southeast Asian Watford supporters group. So yeah, I'm just in and around football, but it's not. It hadn't been my job, and it's only been quite recently that I've started doing it.
So, as part of you just mentioned, obviously today being Frank Sue Day. So I know that Ants and I went down to Watford yesterday. We watched Watford and Stoke. Do you want to let us into a little bit of some of the activities that we had before that and some of the things that were going on yesterday?
Yeah, yesterday was amazing. It was a brilliant day all round. So we started the day off at the Watford Museum, where we listened to a bit of work done by a young journalist called Lewis Pears. and we had a Q&A. It was quite really it was really cool actually to be in a forum where we could talk about Frank. And then after that, we went to the game. Um, Before the game happened, Watford had a big display on the big screen to commemorate Frank's 81st anniversary of his first game, which was really fitting because obviously he was a Stoke. Yeah, he spent most of his career at Stoke and he's really well known at Stoke. Um, and then with the work that we're doing with Watford, with the foundation, and as I said with EC Hornets, it was a really nice thing for them to do because yeah, it's important. It's representation. Representation matters a lot, and to have that on the big screen to tell everyone about this story, it was just amazing, really.
Yeah, no, 100%. It was a great day. Honestly, I really enjoyed it, and to think about, like, for example, a lot of people I think will have had a similar journey learning about Frank Su. Like, obviously not you being the co-founder of the foundation, but I remember 2 years ago I found out about Frank just from the Google Doodle, which I know you've got nicely framed in your
Oh yeah.
house, uh, which which was, yeah, my entry point to learning about Frank. So it was really great yesterday to listen into the work that's being done, and filling in more blanks in, someone that I think everyone should know about or at least be aware about, in football. So you talked a little bit about EC Hornets, but am I right in thinking, because I know we've spoken a lot privately about the supporters group stuff, and are you the first East and Southeast Asian officially recognised supporters group in the country, or do you know anything more about kind of
So
how
we're
big it
we
is?
are we are affiliated with the Football Supporters Association and part of the Fans for Diversity project. Um, but I do also know that there are other groups out there. For example, I think it's Brighton, is it Hong Kong Seagulls, something like that. But it's a Brighton supporters group who I think originally they were fans in Hong Kong, but a lot of them have come over and settled around the Brighton area, and they've also got quite a big group going on. So there are little pockets around, and I think with a lot of these things, you'll always find a group of people supporting or doing something from a East and Southeast Asian background, but it's not joined up. No one knows about it. No one know. It all works in the island kind of thing. So I think it's going to be interesting to. I mean, I'm learning a lot too. Like the other day, I went to an event and I found out the supporter representative at Arsenal. He's also of East Asian background. So there are people dotted around in like football fans, and yeah, I think it'll be interesting to. So if you know anyone who's in these groups or in these areas, yeah, get in touch.
So, I mean, Alan, from everything I've heard about you and from talking to you, you seem like a very very busy man. You got a lot of things going on. So, I mean, outside of the Frank Su Foundation and the EC Hornets, is there anything else going on at the moment with you? Is there anything else you'd like to spotlight or talk about?
Yeah, so I mean, with the Frank C Foundation, we are working on, as I said, those three main areas. We have a load of tournaments coming up in the summer, the CCC Cup, and also the Frank Su Cup, which is a collaboration between the Frank C Foundation and county FAs. So we had a tournament up in Liverpool a few months ago, and we want to bring that down to Middlesex, and then hopefully one also in the Midlands somewhere. We're still in talks with local FAs to figure out where we can do this. Um, so yeah, we want to provide more opportunities for people from East and Southeast Asian backgrounds to play football um, in a competitive environment. And also, there's also a lot of things that we try and put together because later on in the year, it's actually the 90th anniversary of his first Stoke game. So we want to do something quite big for there. There's part of it which is we want to do something with the heritage side, so maybe some sort of exhibit or some sort of yeah, something visual. We're still working on it. I'm still our my volunteers are still working on thinking of how we could bring this to life. And also we want to work with Stoke because this is a big piece of not just our history, but their history too, because they're part of, you know, they're part of this whole thing. I think it's important to be working with clubs to highlight people from our backgrounds that's been at their club already. Like just today, so they've they've reposted, well, they posted out stuff on their social media about Frank Zoub today being his first, England call up, and I know I'm not supposed to really look at the comments just in case, but actually it's been very, very positive. A lot of people saying, "Oh, I remember Frank," or my dad or my granddad still was telling me about how he was his favorite player. So it's really important that, we connect with the clubs and the people around it to say, yeah, he's one of yours too. So it's important that all those things. But no, I've got loads of ideas in my head of other things of how to make football more accessible for everyone really.
And what about your work with the FA? Because I know you, aside from those projects, which I think a lot are kind of centered around your work around DC Hornets and the Frank Sue Foundation, I know you've also recently become a FA community champion. Do you want to like talk a little bit about that and maybe the coaching side as well?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I mean, it all fits in because the role as a community champion, well, my role is to go into groups from different ethnic backgrounds or different communities which the FA haven't really connected with. And we are trying to encourage more coaches and get more people to start their coaching journey. So recently, I had a group um, working in the London area where we took them to Wembley, and then we did a workshop there explaining the pathways to being a coach, what it means to be a coach, and what sort of things. And because I think a lot of times people don't think they can be coaches. They think, oh, to be a coach, you've got to be like a good player, or it's not for me, or and I think a lot of times it's not about that though, is it? A lot of times it's about finding someone who can help facilitate things for like a young person, facilitate a game for a young person, or facilitate a session for a young person. It doesn't mean you have to be technically gifted or know every single thing about football. A lot of time is working with the children or working with the players, and in some ways that's probably more important than knowing how to score a screamer from 30 yards. So yeah, I mean it's really important that that sort of work too, because I think that not it hasn't been done before, and now we're doing this sort of stuff, which hopefully would mean it'll bring up the coaches, and then hopefully around that the communities will get better at football, and then from that maybe we'll find a next Frank soon. I don't know. So there's a lot of work, but I think it's really important that we're addressing these things.
Yeah, and I think it's really important to highlight because I know we've talked about this previously, like the work that you're doing around the coaching side and the grassroots footballs to help encourage, obviously not only the next Frank Sue, but maybe the next young female East Asian football player as well to come through the ranks. Because obviously, women's football's exploded in the last year, right? So it's something I think we should definitely highlight because I know you guys have got um, like a mixed gender coaching situation and
Yeah,
grassroots situation.
I think that's probably one of the most exciting bits too sometimes, because I I regularly get parents coming back to me saying, "Oh yeah, my kid wants to be the next Frank Sue," and it's a girl, and getting little girls involved in football when I mean, even having guys from East and Southeast Asian background is rare. Well, not rare, but it's not as common. But to have a girl, that's yeah. When I see that and I see how they've kicked on, so they probably come to a few of our sessions. So we do sessions at Watford where we bring people from the community down to play, and all the coaches are the parents. And just hearing from the parents like, oh yeah, she didn't like football at first, and then after a few months at our sessions, she's joined a local club, and they're bumping into other parents who've come down who same thing, their kids never liked football before, and now they've started, and it's it's great that they're going back out and finding their place in the local community, not just in the East and Southeast Asian communities, but everywhere else, and being and feeling I don't know, feeling that it's they're able to do that. I think that's really important.
Yeah, no, you're 100% right. It's great to see that accessibility and kind of availability for all kinds of people to play football. Obviously, it's really important. Now we've got. I think that's really you've shared so much info. I don't know how really to keep digging into this stuff because you've obviously got loads more, and we'd love to have you on again. I think closer to maybe one of your bigger events or one of the bigger tournaments beyond Frank Sue Day. But we've got a very special segment. On the podcast where we try and look at and ask our guests about their favorite ever Asian football players. I guess you're probably a bit of a no-brainer, and you probably have to say Frank Sue. But I just want to check:
Yeah,
is it Frank
yeah,
Sue?
contractually obliged to say that. Yep.
I think one thing beyond his story, I know me and Johns have talked about this previously. Like, obviously, we won't have seen Frank play. So, like,
Yeah.
can you think of someone like in modern times who you could maybe compare him to, or maybe give us like a bit of a
Yeah.
description of his style? I know where
Who's
you're
the
going to go with
current
this. Yeah.
who's the current
I
Frank Sue?
I'm always asked this question, and I always find it hard because it is a. I mean, the thing is, back then football was very different, right? So they were playing the WM formation. So I'm not sure if you know much about the historic inverting the pyramids, all that kind of stuff. But so he played across the back line anywhere. So he played as so a left wing half or right wing half, which is sort of like a defensive midfielder. He was said they said that he was one of the best in the country in that sort of position, um, and because of his versatility and because he was very fit, he was a very fit player, miles ahead of what they were back then because he was teetotal and he really wanted to the fitness side of it really was part of his game. So I'm building this up now. So I don't know, it's really hard. I mean, I've said this person's name quite a few times, but I'm not sure if I'm doing him a disservice. But the whole James Milner sort of you're shaking your head now.
Versatile and he has an engine. Yeah.
Yeah, but no, why don't you guys help me? Why don't you guys help me? Give me some ideas because I get asked this all the time, and as I said, I'm struggling to think of someone who has that same sort of fit because it is sort of he ticks those sort of boxes where I don't think you have that much of a modern sort of. He's not a glitzy sort of player in that sense, but then he was very skillful. So yeah, I don't
Yeah, it's a hard one. I don't know if we can endorse Liverpool
know.
Liverpool comparisons on this podcast, considering the teams we support. But I mean, it's probably hard not to look at that Liverpool midfield when it comes to comparisons. If you're talking about players who've got engines, who are good on the ball, but have got that blend of both physicality and technical ability, because a lot of their midfielders are like that. I don't know if I'd say James Milner because of that, but you've got like half of their midfielders like that. So you're probably on the money with that. But that makes a lot of sense, to be honest.
I want to get
And I
family
think
members calling me up and tell me like I hate it when you do. But they're all Liverpool fans, most of them, so I don't know. It might be all
yeah,
right.
yeah, I was going to say you're probably all right with the family. They probably endorse those Liverpool comparisons, and to be fair, those are all really good players. I mean, I know James Milner's getting on a bit now, but he's lasted the test of time. He's been really solid and had a bit of a renaissance, and sounds like he's going to Brighton next season. So he's got, he's still got some years left in his legs. But we can do ours since you've gone for the no brainer and said Frank Sue. I'm going to be a complete home teamer and go for Ji-sung Park. Beyond the fact he played for our team, he was really pivotal in a couple of title winning teams. It wasn't just his work rate and his kind of ability to carry out a tactical assignment. Thinking of marking out Andre Pirlo in the Champions League, but I think back to all those kind of blistering counter attacks that we've done, against Johnson's team a few times away at Arsenal. I can
Do you
remember a
think
couple of goals that
he's a bit of a
he
game
scored.
changer in the perception of how East Asians are perceived in football?
Who, Ji-Sung Park?
Yeah.
Yes, it's a hard one because I think there are a lot of his attributes kind of already fit maybe some of the preconceived ideas about East Asian sports people. In that he was really hardworking, he was very determined, tactically aware, and he was like very disciplined. Which I think a lot of people have that. Like it can be I don't know if it's a misconception or if it's the right preconception because a lot of the time it is fairly apt for an Asian kind of player in any sport. But I think he's an interesting one because I think he does because of those things. He gets some of his technical ability was kind of overlooked, and the fact that he was good on the ball. He scored quite a decent chunk of goals everywhere he was, whether it was in the Netherlands or at Man United in the Premier League. I think he probably both did a benefit and in some ways played into some of the stereotypes. I guess I think when you think of a player like that who's maybe broken more stereotypes or some of these kind of things and been a bit of a game changer. I probably Johnson's going to hate this as well, but lean more towards a Heung-min Son type player because if you look at Son, I think people try to give it the whole he's what hard working, he's such a lovely friendly guy and everything like the typical kind of positive stereotypes people put on Asian players. But if you look at his game, he's a lot actually about pace and power and deadly finishing, which a lot of the time you don't really correlate those skill sets with an Asian player. It hasn't been done before. So I think he's probably a player who I look at who's kind of broken the mold a bit more. And I think maybe Ji-Sung Park was probably the first cowboy over the hill, and he got a lot of those he took a lot of arrows in his chest because he did fit a lot of that mold, but I think Son's come, quite a few years later and broken that. But I don't. What do you think, Johns? Do you think Son's a? I know you might be a bit biased with this, but do you agree?
Uh I feel like the main thing with Park Ji Sung was that he showed that an Asian player can do it for the top of the top. And I think that was really because even Son at Tottenham, that's not the top of the top, is it? It's the top of the middle. Um, and I mean, obviously, he's done it on a great stage, like Champions League final type of stuff. He's done it in Europe. He's done it in the Premier League. I get it, but I think Park really showed to get the trust of someone like Sorao in the biggest of games against the best of opposition to be trusted by the best manager of all time. That I think it showed that Asian footballers can do it at the highest level. And I think, I mean, around that time, a lot of stuff was happening, with the, Park's performances that led up to him going to United in the first place. The performances, the South Korean teams, the Japanese teams in international tournaments. There was a lot of things going on at that time, and I think it kind of just solidified that Asian players can do it at the highest level. I don't know if it necessarily broke any stereotypes of how Asian players tend to play. I feel like you said, kind of Park actually maybe played into those stereotypes a little bit just because of how much of an engine he had and how quiet and kind of conservative he was, but just how undeniable he was in terms of he was going to run all over the park. If I could compare him to someone today, and people might shoot me down for this one, but it's kind of that Kante type of mold of he's going to be everywhere all the time. He's not going to be in your face. He's not going to be shouting in your face doing like Granit Xhaka type of things, but he's going to be all over the pitch all the time, and you're going to have an absolute nightmare trying to get away from him. And I think Park Ji-sung really, he personified that, for most of the things that most of the times I saw him, unfortunately, a couple of times against Arsenal too, which was painful at the time. But now I look back on it with, maybe less pain.
We mentioned Son too, and I don't want to gloss over what happened over the weekend with what happened at Crystal Palace with the fans. But do you think, even though we're saying that maybe Son is the one who's probably changing perceptions, yet he's still facing some of the same racism? It's just racism, isn't
It's
it?
the second time. It's the second time this season, isn't it? Happened to him
Yeah.
earlier this season at Chelsea as well. So
I think it's been more than that even. I think this might have been the third or fourth time it's happened this season, and definitely it happens just so frequently with Son. It's unbelievable. I mean, it's happened. I think that incident was at the Spurs stadium as well. So I mean, the level of acceptance that it seems to have still in football stadiums, or some of the football stadiums in the country, that away fans, a real small pocket of away fans, can come in and do that. I think the Chelsea one, you're right, Johnson, but I think that may have been at Stamford Bridge. I'm not 100% sure, but so I think it's so good that it's being called out, and that clubs are taking like really swift action. But it's still sad to see that it is going on. But we're not alone in this. We saw. I know it doesn't maybe happen as much in the UK, but you see incidents with Lukaku, for example, in Italy, against black players still happening quite frequently over there. And in Spain, I know it happens a lot with Vinny Jr. So it seems to still be things that are happening, maybe to different racial groups and stuff. But at least in the UK, we can see swift action, right? Very, very different to what happens in Spain and Italy, where, in fact, Italy, they uphold Lukaku's ban. And in Spain, they do nothing. The Spanish La Liga president comes out and kind of condemns Vinny for provoking the fans rather than condemning the fans for their actions. So it's sad that happens to Son, but yeah.
I think on the topic of, Son really changing the game in terms of showing what an Asian player can do, there's going to be some uncomfortable things that come along with that, right? Like, we tend to see the players that get the most abuse generally, whether it's racial or just in general, tend to be the ones that are the best, right? They tend to be the ones that are scoring the goals against you. They tend to be the ones that are trailblazing, doing new things. So I think, with Son, it how good he is, how much he scored. I mean, joint top scorer last season as well. So I think
club now, isn't he? He joined the 100 club.
Exactly. So I think that is part of the reason that we're seeing probably more focus or attention on him as well from opposition fans, because he's doing it against them constantly, right? So I do hope that with more players like Son, with more players that are really delivering those blows, you will start to see more and more acceptance of those types of players. And I think there will be, of course, an uncomfortable period, just like there has been pretty much with every other race. And even still to this day, like Anne said, it still continues, even, after international tournaments, we've seen it too, right? So I do think it's just about frequency, and it's about getting more of us in the game. And that's why, I commend you so much with what you're doing, the Frank Su Foundation, to get more East and Southeast Asian players into the game, because at the end of the day, that's the only way that we're really gonna get to a point of diversity, and a point of acceptance, is if we can see more of these faces, we can get more people used to seeing these faces and understand that this is just part of the game, and it's actually best for the game as well to have this much diversity.
No, you're spot on, Johnson. I think before we have to wrap up, you have to tell us your favourite, because just to lift the mood a little bit, because we went on a real downer talking about racism, which is really important.
I started that.
No. You're right. You're right, Alan, to bring up, because we can't avoid it. It's an elephant in the room. It just recently happened. It happens a lot. You don't hear a lot from East and Southeast Asian communities, or we're not amplified as much when things happen like this to our community. So it's really important that we share our voice and make sure people hear it, like what it is from our perspective and what we're trying to do. But yeah, Johns, come on, it's on you. Lift the mood a little bit. You're gonna say Tomiyasu? Who are you gonna say? Who's your favourite football player?
I would give Tomiyasu a couple more years. You never know. He might end up becoming my favourite Asian player of all time. If he keeps putting in clangers like feeding open goals to De Bruyne, then maybe not. But I'm gonna say, the player that always sticks out in my mind, and the one that I'll probably remember the most over the largest period of time, is going to have to be Nakamura for Celtic. So growing up, he's a little bit different from Park Ji-sung and from Frank Su, from what I hear, in that he was maybe not such an engine, didn't have, the highest amount of stamina, didn't have the quickest feet, didn't have, the pace or necessarily the strength like you might associate with the two players we just talked about. But he had that technique that I really feel is kind of once in a lifetime type of technique. And growing up, particularly, we talked about this before, as a kid, what do you want to be able to do on a football pitch? For the most part, you want to be able to hit a free kick top bins, right? You want to be able to hit a free kick. We all grew up with David Beckham smacking in free kicks in the Euros and the World Cups and whatever else, and just seeing him curl one round the ball. We saw Roberto Carlos, all of these kind of players, right? And it's the moment that you want to have as a kid on the playground, wherever you are. And I remember just Nakamura's technique on free kicks, particularly the fact that, on video games like Pro Evo or FIFA or whatever else, you could put him on a free kick and he had that kind of James Ward-Prowse probability of smacking one over the wall into the top corner. And for me, at least, especially coming from a club like Celtic, where you saw mostly like really fiery players coming out of that team. You saw a lot of you always heard about the derbies with Rangers and those kinds of things. But to see someone like Nakamura, who was almost Pirlo-esque, quite relaxed, but really good technique, to see him play and to just, I know he did it against Man United as well, which also made me love him more. He was the pinnacle of it for me. And there's been a couple to choose from. I think we've got some honorable mentions outside of that, right? Like Honda was a big one too. There was a lot of players in the Japanese and South Korean World Cup teams that I remember seeing and just thinking, wow, never heard of him before, but he's an absolute player. Are there any other honorable mentions you guys want to give in terms of, maybe other Premier League players or elsewhere?
Yeah, go on, Alan.
Yeah, I've got one. One of my favourites is King Kazoo. I don't really know much about his career. Well, all I know and all I hold on to is to know that someone in their 50s is still playing at a top level of football. Makes me think there's still hope for all of us more, I'm not going to say elderly, but more refined.
Yeah. No, he's a great shout, to be honest. I don't think, me and Johns talked about bringing this idea to the podcast, we thought it'd be great just to shout out some people who are fairly mainstream that I think kind of get forgotten a little bit, like Frank Su. But I think King Kazoo's a great shout because, like, if we don't look at just the accolades of all these different players, but you look at the longevity to play football for that long, to varying different levels of
Yeah.
of
And all over the
of
place too, because he
ability and
was
leagues.
in Brazil, played in Brazil, Croatia, back in Japan, and it's just a list. Just seeing where he's been, it's like, wow, that's impressive. That is pretty cool. Where's he now? Do you guys know?
I think he's playing in the second league in Portugal, if I remember correctly. He's playing in Liga 2, which, I mean, in your 50s is ridiculous, right? In my 20s, I can barely play Sunday league football. So for King Kazoo to be able to continue to get contracts, he just keeps on getting new contracts with new teams, loans. I don't know what that guy's eating or what regiment he's on for his workouts, but that longevity is just ridiculous. I think I heard something, he's played in 4 decades, which is ridiculous. He's played from like the
Yeah.
1980s all the way to now, which is crazy to think of for a player. So
He's been
yeah,
he's been
I'll
playing
give
for
a
longer
shout out
than
to
most of
him
us
for sure.
are. He's been playing longer than
Alive.
most of us would have been alive. Yeah.
No, he's a class role model as well. Yeah, I think he's the one guy, like you said, Alan, who still gives all of us a bit of hope that we can, be playing five-a-side somewhere on Sunday League and get scouted for a second division Portuguese team. That's not a bad retirement league. But now, anyway, I think Alan, we've run out of time now. But this has been such a great chat, and as John said, when we were kind of thinking about who we wanted to invite on to be our first guest on the podcast, we like both of us just unanimously said we'd want you on because you're doing so much great work in so many different important areas for our community. And I wanted to try and give you, even if it's minimal, because new podcasts, we're not expecting loads and loads of listeners, but it will be out there forever, and people can always come and find this podcast and listen to you talk about all the work you're doing. And we'll definitely like to get you back on,
No, definitely.
in the future to try and do a check in and see how you're doing. But you're doing amazing, man.
And hopefully Watford will be in the Premier League again, and we can
Yeah.
talk about.
Well, I'm taking this opportunity to ask you two if you're going to come down and play five-a-side next week. So get your boots on and come and join.
Yeah, you put us on
Put us
pressure
on the
now.
spot
We
there, mate.
have to now. We definitely have to. We
Yeah.
haven't been. I haven't been for ages, and we love that. That's another great thing that you've got going in the grassroots side that I think is definitely not overlooked. It's fantastic. No, but thanks for joining us, mate. It was
Thank
great
you.
having you on.
All right. Cheers, guys.